Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is a handwoven experience, episode 120. And in this episode, we're going to discuss the very hip herringbone. I think herringbone is so interesting because while we like to claim it in the weaving world, people talk about a herringbone pattern in a lot of different areas, for instance, in flooring, right? You'll hear someone discuss that the tile was laid in a herringbone pattern. So I love that it extends beyond our little fiber worlds. But for today, I'm going to discuss just our little fiber world. So herringbone is a twill. And if you're not familiar, here is what it looks like. I'm sure you've seen this pattern before, maybe not in fabric, but in floors or other places, right? Herringbone is a twill, like I said, and that means that we have some things to consider as we construct our own herringbone pattern. First of all, because it's a twill, we're going to need some floating selvages. Here's what those are. If you look at my fabric I have going here, see my little guy floating right there, just hanging out above all the rest of the yarns. I have one on each side. Those are floating selvages. And what they do is that they guarantee that my weft yarn will always go to the edges of the project. Because of the nature of the pattern, this is a nice kind of safety net to have in place. So it's your shuttle is always wrapping around a floating selvage and always goes to the edge. Otherwise, you can end up with some odd gaps in your fabric. So first off, include some floating selvages. We're working with twill, so they go hand in hand, right? Next up, it's all about the threading. And for herringbone, we need a broken twill threading. Now, I just did an episode 119, all about broken twill threading. So if you didn't catch that, after you watch this one, go back and do a little refresher. It'll help things for sure. But a broken twill threading refers to how we are putting the warp yarns into the shafts, the sequence we're using to do that. And when you're thinking about a herringbone pattern, basically you have a certain sequence where all your yarns are aimed one direction and they stop and there's a break and then they all aim the other direction and back and forth and back and forth. That's how you're creating these kind of cool columns of diagonals that are indicative of a herringbone pattern. So broken twill threading, that's what you're gonna need for our herringbone pattern here. What I think is so interesting about twills in general is that you can have all kinds of different threadings for a twill. So it's kind of cool that we're going to pair up this unique threading with this unique pattern. And lastly, we're going to use a 2-2 twill to create our herringbone. Now, let's talk about what that means. A 2-2 twill refers to how many shafts are up and how many shafts are down at the same time. So when you're creating a herringbone, you are always going to have 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down, no matter where you are in the pattern. And this is a balanced twill. That means that your fabric is going to look the same on the top as it is on the bottom underneath. It's going to look the same, right? So let me kind of show you what that looks like when you have a 2-2 pattern. So I'm going to start off with lifting shafts 1 and 2. Ooh, squeak, don't mind the squeak. Okay, I'm going to start off with shafts 1 and 2. Now I'm going to take my shuttle using my floating selvages. I'm going to go over the first floating selvage and under the next one. That is always my pattern that I use. That's the order that I always do them in. Okay, so I have 1 and 2 shafts. 1 and 2 are up and 3 and 4 are down. So pull this forward and then I'm going to move it just like you would any other twill. So then I'm going to go to 2 and 3. I'm going to shift it just over 1, always having 2 shafts that are up. Again, go over the floating selvage and then under it. Okay, next 3 and 4. You're starting to see the rhythm here, aren't you? And lastly, 4 and 1. So we always have 2 that are up, always have 2 that are down. All right, here, I'll bring you in really close so you can see what I just did. Do you see that? Isn't that cool? Herringbone is very hip. So let's kind of recap. To create a herringbone twill, we're going to need some floating selvages, right? We are going to need a broken twill threading. So as you're setting up your loom, that's one of the things you have to kind of pay attention to, is to make sure you're using a broken twill threading. And we are going to do a 2-2 twill. That means that no matter how we are creating the pattern, we always have 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down. That is always the sequence we're going to use. Now, as you saw in my little tiny example here, I just kind of went one direction. You can go the other direction. As you are threading your project, you can change up the size of your columns. You have lots of options where you can really get creative. But if it's your first time out, keep it really simple for yourself, right? Just 2 yarns or 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down, and then just kind of go through 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 1, and repeat, and just keep going and watch your very cool columns emerge in your fabric that are the hallmark of our herringbone pattern. All right, you guys, if you haven't tried some herringbone yet, I hope this gives you the confidence and the know-how to dive right in. Have a great week. Happy weaving.